Starting at the end of the 5-second countdown. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Okay.
Good afternoon and welcome to the
Recording in progress.
Welcome to the December 9, 2021 special meeting of the Board of Library Trustees. Before we get started with the meeting, I'd like to ask Francesca to explain how the public can participate in this meeting.
Yes, the City of Monterey is committed to the safe attendance of its public meetings. Masks are required for all who attend in person, regardless of vaccination status, except those who are younger than 2 years old or have a medical condition that prevents wearing a mask. We ask that attendees in the council chamber keep their phones and devices muted to prevent audio interference and feedback with the hybrid meeting. The City of Monterey seeks to continue to offer virtual methods for public participation in meetings. If you aren't joining us in person here in the council chamber, there are 2 ways to virtually participate in this meeting. You may join directly on Zoom Gov from your computer or mobile device, or you may call into the meeting. To join the meeting on Zoom using your computer, smartphone, or telephone, use the link or phone number on the agenda at isearchmonterey.com. Since the meeting has started, you will find the agenda under the Recent tab. To join by telephone, dial toll-free 833-568-8864. Enter meeting ID 161-352-8864, followed by the pound sign. If prompted to enter a participant ID, press pound. Detailed instructions on using Zoom are available at monterey.org/meetings. To make a public comment using Zoom, you will click raise hand on the Zoom toolbar. And if you dial in by phone, you'll raise your hand by pressing *9. This meeting is also streamed live on the city's YouTube account at youtube.com/City of Monterey with an approximate 10-second delay, and on Comcast channel 25 with up to a 90-second delay. This concludes this portion, Chair Thompson.
Thank you very much, Francesca. Let's move to roll call. And I think Bob Petty is having some technical difficulties.
He just showed up.
But he's arrived now. So, okay, could we go ahead and do the roll call, Francesca?
Okay. Trustee Moreau.
Here.
Trustee Petty.
Here.
Trustee Joshi.
Here.
Vice Chair Felguth.
Here.
And Chair Thompson.
Here. Thank you very much. All trustees are present, all participating virtually at today's meeting. The first item on our agenda is the consent agenda, which in today's meeting includes just number 1, which is the approval of minutes of the October 28, 2021 meeting. Is there any comments or questions about the minutes? If not, Francesca, could you see if there's any public comment on the consent agenda item 1?
Yes, to make a public comment, please raise your Zoom hand or dial *9. There are no public comments at this time.
Very good, thank you. Any further board discussion? If not, please call the roll.
The first and second.
I'm sorry. Oh, that's right. We haven't had a motion. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Did we have a motion? I'd welcome a motion.
I move to that the minutes be approved. I mean, that the the consent agenda be approved.
I second.
Very good. Motion made by Marcia and seconded by Jennifer. And my apologies for trying to skip the motion. That's not appropriate at all. So now could we please call the roll? And thank you for the reminder, Francesca.
Yes, Trustee Joshi.
Approve.
Trustee Moreau.
Yes.
Trustee Petty.
Yeah.
Vice Chair Felguth.
Yes.
And Chair Thompson.
Yes, motion approved unanimously. The next item on our agenda is public comments, which is an opportunity for any member of the public to comment on any item that is not on our agenda today. Francesca, any members of the public wishing to comment?
For anyone who would like to make a public comment, please raise your Zoom hand or dial *9. There are no public comments.
Very good. Thank you, Francesca. Next section of our agenda is the public appearance items 2 through 6. And I'd just like to remind the trustees that there is a meeting later today in the council chambers of the Historic Preservation Commission, starting at 4. So we should try to end our meeting by 3:30 or 3:45 at the latest to give them an opportunity to set up for their meeting. I don't
How
think
about 3 o'clock?
3 o'clock or 2:30 is even better, but no later than 3:30 or 3:45. I don't think we'll need that time, but I just wanted to make sure. Sometimes we do get carried away with things, so we'll have to see. So with that, we'll move on to the first item under public appearance is item 2, to receive a report from the Ad Hoc Survey Committee and provide direction to staff. Would either Inga or either of the members of the Ad Hoc Survey Committee like to provide an overview?
Why don't I kick it off and then I'll turn it over to the committee members. So we'll remember that this committee was appointed to get feedback from the public about our library services once we'd reopened. And so the purpose of the survey that's been drafted is to determine customer satisfaction with what we've done so far, and to get some feedback to help advise us as we continue with the reopening plan. And in particular, we're interested in finding out how comfortable customers are or patrons are with coming back into the library for using meeting rooms, both to book meeting rooms for their nonprofit groups, but also to attend in-person programming in the library. And we are going to be, once the survey is finalized, we wanted to start kicking it off right away because we want plenty of feedback in order to reach a decision so that we can alert people that the meeting rooms are reopening or are not reopening. If they are reopening, probably the earliest would be February that we could reopen them to give people plenty of time. And then for distribution of the survey in the report, we mentioned that it'll be online and it'll be available in paper as well. Meanwhile, Jim had asked me about Have Your Say Monterey, and Nat is very interested in getting it up on the Have Your Say Monterey page as well. And they have staff that will help us convert it onto that page with whatever needs to happen there. So I will turn it over to the committee members, and that is Bob Petty and Jennifer Felga.
I'll go ahead and kick it off if you don't mind, Bob. Our process was that we met initially via Zoom and that talked about what was the purpose of the survey so we wouldn't get too far afield. We went back to the original charge from the board and worked with the director to go ahead and refine this. And then after putting something together, it went back and forth in several iterations to go ahead and refine it, to reduce the wordiness, to make it easier to navigate, and to try and determine whether the questions we were asking were actually going to get us the information we wanted. We also talked about ways that we can engage the community in this. And one thing that I didn't see in any of the written reports is trying to, in some way, through the neighborhood improvement associations, get the word out that this is available. In addition, I'd like to recommend that we post something up on the Next Door Neighbor web application too, because that's a really good way to engage with the community. So I want to commend Inga and Bob. You guys are great to work with. And it seems like when you have a group putting their heads together, you come up with a better product than if somebody's working in isolation. So I was happy with what we came up with. Bob, do you have anything else that you want to highlight?
One quick correction, Jennifer. The neighborhood associations that you referred to that we want to contact with this. It's not the neighborhood improvement. NIP
Okay.
is a separate appointed group that it's not a neighborhood. Actually, there's one person from every neighborhood making up the NIP. So anyhow, just so that people don't think we're taking it to NIP, for example, we might go to the Old Town Neighborhood Association and do that. And there's associations like that, and they actually pick their NIP reps, but we would go to the neighborhood associations. The only other thing I would add about the survey itself, before we welcome any feedback from our fellow trustees, is that if I didn't catch this when we reviewed the last draft, but on packet page 11, I'm looking at question number 4 of the survey. I'll give you a second to find that. It's packet page 11, and which is question number 4 of the survey. And it says, which services have you used since we reopened? But then question 5 says, have you used sidewalk service? And yet that's one of the choices in question 4. So that seems redundant to me. And what I would recommend is taking out question 5 altogether, leaving sidewalk service as one of the services we're asking them to indicate how often they may have used it. And then question 6 is just a extra special question about sidewalk service, but I think we should take out question 5 because that seems to me to repeat sidewalk service in the list above it in question 4. So given that one correction that I would make, I would say I'm very pleased with the remainder of the survey, the way it's organized. I think we touch on all of the important points about which the staff as well as the board need to have input from the public. And frankly, I'm looking forward to getting this feedback from the public, totaled in a few months from now, so that when we talk to city council and city managers, we have, some data to go on.
Yeah.
So that's all I have to say, except in response to any questions or comments from others in the group.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much, Inga and Jennifer and Bob. And thank you particularly to the subcommittee for doing such a quick work and getting this survey together. I realized it was done in a relatively short amount of time. I have a few comments and suggestions, but I'll hold mine until any other trustees have made their comments. Marcia or Harish, do you have any comments or suggestions or questions?
I just wanted to say I thought it was really well written and clear, and it seems like not one of those surveys that will take a huge amount of time and cause people to lose interest and give up. I think it can be done in short order. I just want to make sure that it's distributed through all the different medium. That message that the city sends out by email would be a good place to put it, and the library's website and all those places, so that it really hits as many people as possible.
Okay, anything else, Marcia?
No.
Okay, Harish, any comments or suggestions or questions?
I do, yes. For number 8, it says, are you satisfied? But a lot of people are not even aware of it. So I think we should start with, are you aware that such a thing exists, or something to that? And then if you are, how satisfied are you? So that will tell us whether we need to publicize it more.
What question, Harish?
Number 8 on page 12, we start talking about the
the Patron App. Okay.
A lot of people seem to be just unaware that it even exists. So perhaps the question could start with, do you know that such a thing exists, or something similar to that? Say, are you aware of this?
We tried to get to
app?
that
And if so,
by not forcing them to say yes or no, but have never used.
correct.
The third choice there, haven't used it, was hoping to get at that exact situation.
But if I could comment on that,
Okay.
I didn't know it was called. I use my phone all the time to do it, but I didn't know it was called the Patron App. So maybe you could just say, as Harish suggested, our Patron app, by which you can check out a book on your phone, right? Or something like that, if that's what the Patron app is. Is that what it is?
Well, it does say you can check out
Yeah, so
materials using your smartphone. Yeah,
Maybe say just by which you can check it out or something like that.
yeah. I think we're trying to kind of convey two things. One is, and I think surveys often do this, they sort of introduce something that people might not be familiar with by way of a question. And so then people are like, wow, I didn't realize that you had that feature. Rather than asking them, are you aware if we have that feature? But
Yeah, I would say let's, the third choice, instead of saying never use, it sounds like, oh, I'd never eat broccoli. Why don't we say have not used?
Also, there's a typo. It should be you can check out materials using your smartphone, not you.
oh yeah.
Yeah, I thought the missing word was alls, and it was you all's cell phone.
Y'all.
Okay, any other comments, Harish?
No.
Then I've got a couple here, and one is just whether to add something. A lot of this has to do with their satisfaction with various services or their interest in various services. And I was wondering if we maybe should add something about asking, do they feel comfortable with MPL's public health measures? Something, I don't like the way I've worded that, but something that to get at whether they feel comfortable coming to the library. And I was curious if you gave any consideration to something along those lines.
Well, we did ask about cleanliness of the building.
Yeah, but that's a little different, I think, than feeling safe from a public health perspective.
Well, and let's reword that question to include the intent of Jim's comment instead of just talking about how clean it is. Because,
Yeah.
you know, I didn't say much when our committee met, but that's almost like saying, is there dust on the floor? I'd rather reword it so that it's more along the health and safety, because that would certainly imply a need for cleanliness.
Yeah.
Well, you could perhaps reword it to, do you
Yeah.
feel comfortable using the library and, or somehow get the cleanliness in there, or
Well, rather
rather
than
than a
add a
separate-
question, I'd rather rewrite that one.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think what I would suggest, since we have a very good committee and staff working on this, is, you know, we've identified a few issues and I've got a few more. Maybe we could just refer those to the committee and to staff and not try to wordsmith it here today at the meeting. I'm comfortable with that if everybody else is.
Yeah.
So in this one, again, my sense of it is, I agree, keeping number 10, but refocusing it somehow on public health and people's comfortableness coming to the library. Kind of leave it up to you how to do that. A couple other suggestions I had was, one is on packet page 10, the very introduction to the survey. Right before question number 1, there's the paragraph about as we continue our gradual reopening, blah, blah, blah. And then the second sentence is, how are we doing so far and what would you like to see reintroduced as funding and health measures permit? I think that's a great introduction, but to me, it was kind of a disconnect between that question mark and then the very next question is, which library card do you have? They didn't seem that related. So my suggestion would be, instead of making that a question, to make that a statement, something along the lines of, this survey will ask you how we are doing so far and what you would like to see reintroduced, blah, blah, blah. So that it doesn't have a question followed by a different question that's not really that related, if you understand what I'm trying to say.
It could be the purpose of the survey is to.
Yeah,
And then-
something like that, exactly.
Yeah.
Anything like that, yeah.
Good.
And then on question number 4 on packet page 11, I thought the first category, building, might possibly be a little confusing to people. And if we have enough room, I realize you have a space limitation with with a survey, but something along the lines of services inside the building or services inside MPL, something that's more related to the service than to the physical location. So I was my suggestion, and again, feel free to use this or not, as the committee reviews these comments. But that was one suggestion, and the one right after it, the sidewalk service, I was going to suggest calling that the outside sidewalk service to differentiate it from the inside the building. So again, those are just suggestions that you can use or not as you see fit. And then on both items 13 and 14, there's a category for graphic novels. And I'm just wondering how well known that term is by the public. I could see some people thinking that that's referring to adult materials, of X-rated.
I brought that up with my fellow committee members and I got outvoted.
Maybe we're old fogies, Bob. I don't know.
Or maybe, maybe that collection we have stashed in the garage, we should get rid of.
That's a good point. So I think, I don't want to speak for Jennifer, but that's a pretty well-known term for in the library world. And so that might be an example of jargon that we take for granted. We do call the collections, the graphic novel collections. We have one in children, teen and adult, and it even says in the card catalog, online catalog, GN for graphic novel.
I personally do think it may be a bit of library world jargon. I know I've seen it and heard it before some, but not enough that that's my first reaction to the term, if you know what I mean. So I was curious.
Is it the case, Inga, that all graphic novels, regardless of the audience for whom they are written, are illustrated rather than photographs? Well, then could we say graphic / illustrated? And that way it's another way of saying comic books. But we're not saying comic books, we're saying illustrated as opposed to, with pictures and stuff. I don't know, I'm agreeing with Jim's wondering how this might be confusing to the general public. Wasn't confusing to me, I was just wrong.
But I think there is some chance it could create a bit of a backlash from some segments of the population that we don't really want or need, especially given some things that are going on in other areas of the country where they're getting into trying to ban books and things like that. I'm just trying to be extra sensitive to those sorts of issues.
I think that's a good contribution.
Okay, anyway, that's just a suggestion. The committee can mull that over and deal with it or not as they see fit. And then the last comment I had was at the very end of the survey after question number 24, I would just suggest something like, thank you for your feedback and assistance, or something along those lines, just to acknowledge people for having taken the time to help us out by filling the survey. So if none of the other trustees have questions or comments at this point, we should get public input. So if this is a good time, Francesca, could you see if there's any public input on this in this item?
Yes, if you would like to make a public comment, please raise your Zoom hand. If you are connected by phone, please dial *9. At this time, there are no public comments, Chair Thompson.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Francesca. Any other trustee comments or questions or things to ask the survey committee to follow up on? If not, I think I don't know that we need a motion on this. I think it's fairly clear the suggestions and that the committee is empowered to, in my mind at least, the committee is empowered to move forward with the survey without bringing it back to the Board of Trustees. Is everybody comfortable with that? Very good. Well, again, my thank you to both Jennifer and Bob for your work on the survey, and also Inga and the staff for your work. And I'm sure there'll be a lot of work involved in administering this survey as well, yet to be done. Okay, thank you. If nothing else on that item, let's move on to item number 3, which is to discuss and approve the library director's work plan. Inga, are there any items here that you'd like to highlight?
Sure. So first of all, there's a typo on the top of page 19. The draft that I brought to you is actually the 2022 work plan, not 2021. So if you could all make that correction, I appreciate that. So this is indeed the draft for the coming year. And what I did was I took the current year and I really tried to incorporate all of the good suggestions and not just suggestions, but the direction that I've been given by the board for the coming year. So I hope that that reflects those, and I welcome your feedback, and we can always adopt this in January if there are sufficient changes that need to be made at this time.
Okay, thank you, Inga. Any questions or comments from the trustees?
I have a question. If I don't want to, is anybody else ready to ask a question?
No, I think you're the first. Go ahead.
Okay, on packet page 21, it's item 3A in the report under learning and literacy programs.
Yes.
The topic of social and emotional learning programs is something with which I'm not familiar in the context of a library program. So if you could
Sure.
fill that empty place in my brain a little bit, I'd appreciate it.
Sure. So social and emotional learning or social and emotional skills are things that are viewed as a prerequisite for kids and teens absorbing their academic work. And so the state of California has had this big initiative, a whole section of the Department of Education that I think really got started in 2017, where they really wanted to, and there's a really nice chart that I can share with all of you that shows what are those different areas of social and emotional learning. But it starts with things like self-awareness, being able to manage your emotions, and being able to form good relationships, and sort of ends with social awareness. And the kinds of skills that get developed are things like self-confidence. Empathy is a really important one, the ability to share, and the ability, of course, to manage your emotions, tantrums and that kind of thing, self-worth, and being able to collaborate. So those are some examples. And the MPUSD superintendent, PK Diffenbaugh, said last year, after the sort of first year of kids learning at a distance, he said we're all concerned that children and teens have fallen behind in their academic work because of having to learn remotely. He said, but I think we really all need to be concerned even more so about their lack of development of social and emotional skills, because that's really going to hinder their ability to catch up academically. And so when we were looking for what could be our big idea for the MC Gives program, we looked around to see what have other libraries done with this social and emotional learning, because those are skills that are needed in order for the academic stuff to sink in. And there's a lot of stuff that we do in the preschool programs, even the baby programs, that have to do with, reading stories about there was an angry bear and he was angry, and then he learned how to not be angry anymore, and do something else. And then there've been lots of mindfulness programs that have been introduced to libraries that have to do with, giving kids skills for how to do a timeout, how to manage themselves if they're feeling upset about something, to, the different techniques that can be used. And the idea is that this kind of programming also mirrors what kids are learning in school. And so we help reinforce what kids are learning in school, because that's a lot of what the library's programming does, is sort of help reinforce skills that are being developed at the school, but in a way that is more creative and less structured than the formal curriculum. So that's what we're looking at. And we reached out to Ohana, which is the new facility that Montage is building up in Ryan Ranch, that's focusing on adolescents and their mental health. And they initially had said, yes, they'd be interested, but I've had a big silence from them recently. And then MPUSD is interested in working with us, and they have some parents programs that they have offered to do at the library that can be done virtually, that help parents learn how to cope with kids' emotional turmoil and that sort of thing, to help support parents. So that is the kind of programming that we're thinking of. Oh, and the other thing is that one library, and so we'll do this as well, is one library has offered these kits that come as a backpack that you can check out and take home as a family, and they're geared towards little kids, but they're, you know, stories and then games you can play to learn about things like self-confidence and how to handle grief and that kind of stuff. Just so that, because one of the things, and it's so interesting as I learn more about this, is of course children don't necessarily have the vocabulary to talk about what's going on. And so lots of times kids just act out their fear, their frustration or whatever, because they don't talk about, you know, oh, what you said hurt my feelings or something like that when they're little. And so this kind of helps parents, help kids learn how to talk about that. And then finally, of course, is there are all these studies that have shown that all of this isolation and lockdown and so forth is having a big impact on mental health for kids, for, you know, suicide rates are up and all this terrible stuff.
Very good. Does that answer your question, Bob?
Yeah, it actually raised a couple. I gather from what you just said, Inga, that it's for all age groups of kids, not just adolescents, right?
Correct.
And from what you were saying, it sounds like if we weren't in, you know, a modified educational situation now, with the schools being open and closed and open and closed, and a lot of people still homeschooling and all that, under normal circumstances, the responsibility for this kind of training would be the school's responsibility.
Yeah. It's
No,
actually,
it wouldn't.
No, it's not seen as that. It's actually, there's, I mean, the school has a responsibility to do it, but as educators, we kind of all have a responsibility. It's the way it's seen. A lot of what libraries do with their programming for really little kids is help little kids learn how to sit and take their turn and that kind of stuff. And we've been doing that for a long time. In fact, we had a great children's librarian who used to tape a big line on the floor to teach kids, like, this is where you don't step out of bounds, and this is, you know, what appropriate behavior is. And what's been happening over the past 10 years or so is they're finding that kids are reaching school without having learned that kind of self-control, so that they're not ready. So they're not ready for school. So there has been an emphasis in the past in library programs for little ones to help them get ready to be in a classroom.
Yeah, I think it's great that the library can jump in and, in a way, take up some of the slack and provide this. It just contributes even more to the notion of the library being a community hub kind of place. And but if we're doing anything that the schools would otherwise normally have to be responsible for, then collaborating with us should have a dollar sign attached to it. I think we should ask for some kind of support. And lastly, why does my box say Francesca?
Probably the way you logged in. but I don't know.
So if
Well, I
had
mean,
said-
if I were she, I would be upset, that's all.
So I don't really see this as taking on a role that the school would normally be doing. I really see this as part of what public libraries and their programming for kids and teens
Yeah.
has been all along, which is it supplements what is being learned by young people.
Let's publicize that we're doing that. I think that's great.
Yeah.
Very good.
And I should mention that so far, MC Gives has raised somewhere around $32,000 towards this project, but
Wow.
there's still time to give by going to the MC Gives website and going to the Friends of, no, the Monterey Public Library Friends and Foundation. And gifts are welcome through the end of the calendar year.
Very good. Very good. Other trustee questions or comments?
I had one.
Go ahead, Marcia.
About the MOBAC shared catalog. My sense is that's kind of out of your hands, isn't it? It depends on whether they want to do it. I mean, it sort of sounds like you can press ahead with it, but I'm not sure that, can you press ahead with it if they, or have they already agreed to do it?
They've agreed to do it. So we had initial meetings where we agreed to do it, and we we created a statement about why we thought it was a great idea. And then because of COVID, well, actually, so then the next steps were, so we had a consultant who led us through a process, and then the libraries wound up agreeing that they wanted to move forward with this. So then the next step was going to be having a cataloging subcommittee, having a circulation subcommittee, having a technology subcommittee, and then each library would appoint somebody to that, and then they would raise whatever issues they saw as being needed to be worked out in order for us to share catalogs. And so it was really Ashley Wright from the Carmel Public Library and myself that kind of had come up with this idea initially. And then, but Ashley was taking the lead. And I should say the Salinas Library Director was the one who got us the funding for a study to see what would be involved. And Salinas Library Director left. And then Ashley, she's now the city clerk for Carmel, as well as all the other things she is. And so she just hasn't had time. So I figured, if this is going to move forward, I should just commit to, doing all I can to move forward with it. And part of the problem had been with COVID. First of all, we were all dispersed, and then so many of us lost staff. So it's been a challenge.
And then the other question is, doesn't this, I mean, the ultimate goal is that you can get books in many of those libraries, which would require funding to ship books back and forth, wouldn't it? So there's a money commitment here, right?
So
it's almost like
that was part of
library loan, right? Kind of.
That was part of a study. So we all currently have MOBAC delivery. And so we get deliveries from all the other libraries, but it's only like once a week or something. Whereas Monterey and Pacific Grove, we pay an extra $1,000 a year to have our delivery go between our two buildings 5 days a week. So there was, that was part of the study, what the additional cost would be, but there also would be a reduced cost for us all paying into the maintenance on the Koha system. So I'm paying right now, Monterey pays its own maintenance fee and Pacific Grove pays its own maintenance fee. So
I see.
Yeah.
Thank you.
If I could piggyback on Marcia's question, there are actually two places in the work plan that the MOBAC shared catalog is mentioned. The other one is under revenue generation on packet page 20. I guess that would be item 1E. And that one says explore shared catalog model where MPL receives compensation for staff systems expertise. And I remember that being mentioned once before, but we haven't heard too much about that piece of the potential project. Could you expand on that a little bit?
Sure, and this is just, of course, what I would be recommending to the MOBAC group. It's not that they've approved this yet,
Right.
but in the models that we've looked at, there are a lot of different models out there for how libraries come together and share an ILS. And in some cases, there are people that are paid by the group to run a particular aspect of the service. And so my thinking is that David Kuhn is the most knowledgeable of all of the staff in our region regarding COHA and the coding and so forth of the system. And so when, for instance, we get a new upgrade and suddenly our self-checks stop working, or our patron library card application doesn't work anymore, he's able to, in some cases, see what it is and fix it. In other cases, he can talk the language, the coding language and so forth with Bywater, who's our provider, to get it fixed. And so my thinking is that the libraries might be willing to chip in and pay a fee to have David do that kind of work.
Okay, very good. Any other trustee questions at this point before we go see if there are any public comments?
Oh, I
If
just
not-
have one question.
Go ahead, Bob.
On page, on packet page 24, it's in the chart that you have there. And the last time we discussed at a board meeting, bookmobile and maybe acquiring some smaller vehicles to supplement the bigger one, and that whole issue. I got pretty excited because I thought it looked like things were moving along, no pun intended, and that, you know, alternatives were really being considered more strongly than ever before. But on the chart here, it says when we're talking about exploring supplementary electric vehicles, you know, parentheses smaller, it says that effort has been paused. And I was just wondering the status of that and why it's paused. And does pause mean we're just taking one breath, or are we back burnering it?
So that was because the chart that you have in front of you is the one that was adopted on December 3rd. And I didn't update the language on that chart, but I can tell you where we are with that right now. So in my work plan, I suggest, and where is that on there? Where's the bookmobile in the work plan? I guess it's at the bottom of packet page 21. Launch bookmobile replacement project in February of 2022. So as you know, we did, Kim and I did submit a grant application for funding to replace our existing bookmobile, and we'll know in January if that, if we're awarded that grant or not. If we're not awarded that grant, I still think that we need to push forward with the process of replacing our existing bookmobile. And then after that work is done, then we can see what funds are left for an electronic vehicle.
They can be used for other bookmobile stuff after we've used it all to get a large but smaller bookmobile.
Yes.
Great, thank you.
And we are having issues with the generator right now with our vehicle. And so it's currently at the shop in Salinas, I believe it is. And we don't know when it's coming back. So we're having to like borrow a city van and load up stuff on the van. It's really awkward. So the sooner we can move forward, the replacement, the better. And also,
I just see these little green pieces of paper with an S on them sliding up into the sky right now.
Okay, any other trustee questions?
Thank you, Inga.
Before we go to the public? If not, Francesca, could you see if there's any public comment on this item?
Yes, to make a public comment, please raise your Zoom hand. If you are connected by phone, please dial *9. There are no comments at this time.
Thank you, Francesca. Is there further discussion of this item before we look for a motion to approve it? I would just offer my own comment, which is I thought Inga did a very good job of pulling this work plan together, and I thank her for the work on that. And I think it'll be helpful, as we figure out what we're doing next year.
I'd be willing to offer a motion for approval.
Is there a second?
Yeah, I'll second.
I think Marcia had the first second, even though Bob was right there.
Go
And
ahead.
Jennifer made the motion. Any further discussion of the motion?
Well, I should just mention that because this is a public meeting we're having right now, nothing that pertains to anything that was discussed in the closed meetings when we did the annual evaluation can be interjected into this. And as Inga pointed out, that she was following directions and suggestions that she received during that process as well. So beyond what we're seeing here that's available to the public, I just am saying we should all keep in mind that there are those confidential closed session aspects to what I would call her work plan as well. And I know she's aware of that, but I'm just making it.
Good. Thank you for that comment, Bob. Any further board discussion? If not, Francesca, please call the roll.
Trustee Joshi,
Yes.
Trustee Moreau,
Yes,
Trustee Petty,
Yes,
and Vice Chair Felguth,
Yes.
and Trustee Thompson.
Yes, motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much. And now we'll move on to item number 4, which is to receive a draft diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging plan and provide direction to staff. So Inga, do you want to start this one off?
Sure. So you'll remember, since we were just talking about our priorities and strategic initiatives for 2021, 2023, that staff brought forward a suggestion to go under the organizational excellence category, that a diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging and racial equity plan be developed. And so there's been and that was folded into the plan. So it was discussed and adopted. So then there have been a number of activities that have taken place so far around the topic of diversity, equity, and inclusion, ranging from a training that Kim and Francesca attended to the programming that happened during the summer, where we encouraged people to read CAST and had discussions, and that was very successful. To Kim had a CSUMB student draft a diversity, equity, inclusion webpage, and that was partly in response to some feedback that we received from one of the council members who thought the library would be a great place to send people to help them learn how to be more sensitive to those types of issues in their workplace. And so that's a draft that we're still looking at. And then a plan, we said a plan would be drafted and brought to you. So this is what we, a staff member will do now is present the draft, and then get your feedback, and then possibly bring something back to the next meeting. So, and then I turn it over to Francesca.
Okay, thank you. Francesca, take it away.
Okay, thank you. So this is a very, very rough draft outline, actually, that will need to be. I'm going to share, see, and I did send you an email, so if you prefer to see it on your own computer, you're also welcome to do that. And I will be reviewing a few different aspects, including some resources too. So the outline would be that a diversity statement is created with staff doing so. There's a consideration to adopt the Urban Libraries Council statement on race and social equity. And this plan will tie in how DEI and belonging ties into the mission, vision, and values. What I thought would just be useful first is really to see the Wisconsin Public Libraries has this rubric. And when you look at the section 2, where the collections, programming, and services are identified, and then the section 3 with for ours, as far as the meeting room and event space, computers and technology, collection spaces, the restrooms, staff areas, location, hours and services, library card registration, and then the online access, along with the marketing, community engagement, funding. The self-care is something that they have put in theirs, and then the inclusive culture. So with our suggested is to review the collection and do an audit of diversity for authors and then characters, depending. There is a library journal course that is coming up in the spring of 2022 of how to build a diverse collection. And I know that our current selector is really fabulous at purchasing a lot of the materials that are of interest. And so anyways, I'll leave that. The programming and events is to analyze the demographics of the community. And where some of these are coming from is that the Public Library Association developed this year a new benchmark survey for staff and diversity. And I will show that as well. So what needs really to be determined is the focus of the plan on the collection, programming and events, reviewing the library space. The marketing is something else that is really encouraged to ensure that we are using a wide representation and that also the language is available in either non-English languages or also at a reading level that can be understood. The community partnerships and engagements, the intentional partnering with community organizations to broaden our reach. The library policies is to review the policies with a lens, and then the budget to review and see, are there funds that are allocated specifically for programs, materials, and staff training? And then that staff also receive ongoing training. And part of that will also be to survey staff to understand a baseline knowledge. And at the end of the plan, this will be expanded, but then there will be a expanded glossary with various terms. Let's see. This is the Urban Library Council statement on race and social equity. And I would ask your guidance as to whether you want to take time to read this. If somebody wants to read it, it's this section right here that starts with as leaders. It's not something that we're asking for you to adopt today. It's rather something that can be considered.
So is this one of the items that you've sent to us?
Yes,
Okay.
it is in the plan.
Okay.
I mean, I can't speak for the other trustees, but my sense of it is we're getting hit cold with a lot of material. I don't think we're going to be ready to take any action at all today,
Yes.
other than maybe just some initial reactions.
Yes. So I think the final thing that I will share is that, well, two things. One, and I also sent this to you, the Wisconsin Public Libraries Inclusive Services Survey has a really in-depth questions that can be reviewed by potentially a committee or staff that are assigned to further dive into review how our library services can integrate more with the diversity, equity, and inclusion. And lastly, I will share the Public Library Association. And you also received a copy of this as well. And this is a new survey that was developed this year that they're asking public libraries to complete, and will be then a baseline moving forward. And so you can see that they are asking with the focus areas and the goals for our EDI and the number of items there. And then it specifically has questions as to whether we engage in any of these activities.
So Francesca, these surveys are for the committee. I'm just trying to understand what all the surveys are. They're for the committee itself or the library itself to answer. They're not surveys that one would send to patrons or.
No, exactly. No, it's an internal for
Okay.
public library director or administrator to complete, or the.
Okay.
It was more as a guideline, potentially for if there is potentially a staff committee that's developed or a working committee with a trustee, community member, staff members, that this provides a potential framework to see or to compare the Monterey Public Library with other public libraries across the United States. So this first year, it will likely have fewer actual submissions, but as it continues, and I'm not sure, and I don't know if Inga or David regarding the California State Library, if they've begun to integrate anything into the state library, and I know that's coming up on the agenda. So. I would think let me see, I'm going to take this. So I don't know if it's something that the board would actually direct staff to complete an audit of the diversity for diversity of the authors and characters, or the programming, events, services. As you see, this is a very rough draft and needs additional work. So it could be that we come back in February.
So can I ask?
Sure, go ahead, Marcia.
No, so how is the library now organized to be doing this work? Is there a committee of people, Francesca, working with you, or is everybody doing it, or are you doing it alone, or?
No, that is something that we intend to have staff be part of this process, since it is essential that they're on board and provide their feedback. So it's our plan together. But at this time, Kim and I had started with it earlier this year, and when management duties came to her, then I said I would work on it, and then museum duties came to me. So I also didn't unfortunately have as much time allocated for it, but right now it is myself.
Right, so Francesca was tasked with drafting a plan, and then once we saw what a plan looked like, then we would decide would it be appropriate to suggest a trustee subcommittee or have a staff committee, but we needed to sort of see what the draft plan would entail.
So does that complete the staff presentation? Or Kim, did you want to add anything?
No, I don't have anything to add at this time. Thank you.
Okay. Did you have anything further, Inga?
I think that I would recommend that the trustees receive a more developed plan in February.
You'd earlier mentioned January. You think February is more realistic?
Well, I understand that Francesca would like to convene some staff members and have other people to discuss this with. And so in order to accomplish that, then I think February is more realistic.
Okay, I understand. Any trustee comments or questions at this point?
I just had one, and that is that it seems to me that this is also something that there might be community people who could serve as a really good resource. And you know, I know in those forums that you folks did over Zoom, there were a number of community volunteers who were very good, who seemed to have a good grasp on these. And I was wondering if it's possible to reach out to some of them to have them for input or help doing this, since it seems like a fairly Herculean task.
I think that would be good in executing the plan, but in deciding what the library wants to do, it's probably more appropriate that the library sort of try to flesh out more what it is they want to do before they invite partners to help.
Unless it might be, I could see potentially Laura Lee, who was with the Community Foundation, is active there in DEI planning. And then of course the Showing Up for Racial Justice members, which they might offer suggestions of what is important for the starting base for the community as far as the programming collection, and maybe they might, as a community member, see something that we might not.
I certainly think it could be shared with, you could get input from, just like you want to get input from staff, you could get input from other people as well.
Yeah. One question I have, is there a similar effort going on in other city departments or a citywide policy? I know there's been some citywide training, but I don't know kind of where the citywide approach to this issue is. Do you happen to know, Inga?
So yes, so I know that there was a resolution adopted by the city council that directed the city manager, and sorry, I don't know the number of the resolution, but I can look that up. I looked at it recently. Anyway, that directs the city manager to make sure that diversity, equity, and inclusion is folded into the city's work that they do. And so one of the ways the city manager is starting to implement this was the mandatory diversity, equity, and inclusion training that took place in October and November. Another thing that is going to be worked on is the HR department is going to look at all of their practices more closely with diversity, equity, and inclusion in mind. So there isn't a, there was a statement that was included in the resolution, but there isn't a plan per se. And then as far as other libraries and other cities, there have been a lot of public libraries that have been working on diversity, equity, and inclusion steps, and partly just training their staff. But I think Redwood City, I want to say, no, sorry, Mountain View. So Mountain View is a city that also has a more of a citywide approach to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And in that case, the library was sort of seen as the resource. So the library's done more in terms of promoting lists of resources to consult and reading lists and books and that kind of thing.
Okay, thank you. Other trustee questions or comments? If not, I don't think we've gone for public input yet, have we? Francesca, could you see if there's any public input on item number 5? Excuse me, item number 4.
Sure. To make a public comment, please raise your Zoom hand, or if connected by phone, dial *9. There are no public comments at this time. And
Okay.
could you also mention the value drivers at the city council just?
Oh, right. So the value drivers that were recently adopted include a lot of reference to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And particular value driver, are these the newest ones? They just got posted?
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
So,
December 7th.
right. So it's the one that has to do with history and culture, makes sure that we tell Monterey's story. Let's see. So I think it's number 8 or number 9.
Mm,
Right. So
well, I think
Okay.
this is online. Yes. Oops. Okay.
that's another source to look at.
That's fine. That's fine. It seems to me that since we're being hit cold with a lot of this, we probably, unless there's just any general comments or reactions any trustees have, I think probably we're better off waiting until the staff comes forward in February, at our February meeting with a fleshed out plan or recommended plan. And I don't know at this point whether it would make sense to create a board committee to work with staff on this. My sense is it may be premature for that. And maybe we'll kind of see as we go whether that makes sense or not. But if any of the trustees are interested in participating on such a committee to focus on these issues with the staff, please let me know. And so if we do decide to do that, I'll know if there's any trustees that have already expressed an interest in participating in that. But I don't think we need to get into the specifics of that at this point. So unless Inga, you or Francesca were hoping to get more out of the board at this point, I think that's probably about as far as we can take the item today.
Yes.
Okay. Any other trustee comments on this item? Okay, then let's move on to item 5, to receive a report on annual statistics and provide direction to staff on the frequency of the annual and monthly statistical reports. Inga, did you want to provide an overview on this item?
Sure. So when the benchmarking committee gave their final report, they suggested some changes to the information that we find in our monthly reports. That's been implemented. And then they also strongly suggested that each year after the library completes its annual statistical submission to the state library, that we bring forward an annual statistical report. And that annual statistical reports would not only include information that you see in your monthly reports, but it would be more robust than that. And then there would be excerpts, relevant excerpts from what is submitted to the state library, and also some calculations. And so that's what you have before you. You have 2 different documents. And then we want to know, going forward, once you've digested these, what changes you might suggest in terms of frequency of the monthly reports that you receive, and frequency and usefulness of this annual report.
Okay. And I know there were a few formatting issues with
Thank you. Yes.
the first report. I don't know if you want to comment on those or wait and let us comment on them.
No, I can comment on them. Thank you. So unfortunately, the way this a report that begins on packet page 34, the way it prints out, it's from our Access database. The way it prints out, it was cutting off some of the headings. And so if you go to packet page 35, for instance, just a little bit down the page, there's a dark band that says in-house programs sponsored and promoted by the, and then it cuts off. And then the one right below it, off-site programs sponsored and promoted by the. So David has fixed this because it's a report from an Access database, and the margins were such that it was cutting off the full text. But the word missing there is library. And then on the following page, packet page 36. Unique cards used annually by customers residing in. Oh, that works. That's fine. Those are fine. Seems like there was another place, but it was.
It's the one above that where it says items checked out at MPL to all customers residing, where the word in was left off as well.
Oh, yeah, residing in. So the word in is missing. And a final thing that we did think was useful, so has been added since this report was published, but of course it would show 0 in this particular set of years, is we want to be able to look at the circulation that takes place using the Patron App. And so we'll add that to the breakdown of circulation by self-checks, by library help desk, and by bookmobile.
Thank you, Inga. I think there was one other, I'm not totally sure it's a formatting issue, but it's some sort of data issue on the use of library meeting rooms on packet page 35. It shows more groups than participants, which doesn't seem to make much sense. And I think you said maybe that was because we stopped counting participants, but maybe continued counting groups. Is that the explanation?
Right. So staff had a capacity issue, and so they weren't entering the number of participants. We do have that data, and the plan had been to have somebody assist staff to enter that data so that it would be up to speed again. And so that's a good thing to remind ourselves that when we reopen the meeting rooms, we need to make sure that we're counting both the number of groups and also the number of participants that are in those meeting rooms.
So in this particular case on page 35, where it says 182 groups, that might be correct, but the number of participants is incomplete. Is that the way to think of this?
Exactly, yes.
Okay, good. Any other trustee questions or comments at this point before we go for public input? Marcia.
I just have a little question on page 36. When it lists Carmel, Pacific Grove, the items checked out at MPL to customers residing in and the unique cards, the designation Monterey County, that means Monterey County without Monterey and Monterey County without Carmel, Pacific Grove.
Monterey County Free Library.
Okay, well, maybe it should say that because it's very confusing since all those places are in Monterey County. You can't, it's hard to, yeah. So that's that other card that's Marina and Seaside and all those other places.
Good point. Any other questions about the, Harish, go ahead.
I have a few. Let me go over them one by one. In terms of formatting itself, it would be nice if the header could appear on each page, and some of the line at the bottom seems to overlap with the footer of the printing, and that's obliterated. I don't know if that's for everybody, but page 34, live guides, and then it's obliterated with the footer of the page. So just in terms of, okay. In circulation services, I noticed that the help desk, there's been a huge jump, and I'm wondering if the data is skewed because the library's curbside services was counted as help desk, because that would mean, not that people were doing it on purpose, but they were required to.
Sorry, which page are you on?
Page 34.
Mm-hmm.
Under circulation services,
Yes.
library help desk, there's a big jump in the number of help desk things from 66,000 to almost doubled. And I was wondering if that is skewed because we had the curbside checkout, which is counted as part of help desk.
Right, so the very good observation. So that column is year 2020, 2021, when the
Correct.
building was closed. So there was no opportunity for anyone to use the self-check machines except for the volunteers and the staff that were in the building. So then the library help desk had been moved into the lobby and it was providing sidewalk service there. And so those numbers, 115, 253, are the number of transactions that took place, checkouts that took place at that location. You're right. Mhm.
Right, so yeah, it looks very skewed, like something's wrong with this. So that's the explanation.
Right. The Bookmobile one checkout, sort of the Bookmobile was put on pause that whole 12-month period, but we think one staff member accidentally was logged in with the Bookmobile login when they checked something out to themselves. And so it was left there as one checkout.
Okay. On page 35, in the program sponsored and promoted, under attendance, does that include the virtual attendance, virtual meetings?
Yes. Yes.
Because I'm wondering how we had so many people there. So, okay. So,
Correct. It included, and the state gets very specific about it, but it didn't include anything that was pre-recorded and watched. It included only, Zoom type meetings. So therefore, all of the weekly story times that we were recording, pre-recording and sharing on YouTube didn't count for children, but for the adults, we had a lot of Zoom programs. So that's why we had such great attendance.
and the last comment I have, a question, is on page 36. It's about the MPL and PGPL items checked out. So Pacific Grove, there was a big jump from the previous year to this one by 4,000. And I was wondering, is that because they were closed while we were open for curbside and we were checking out for them? Is that why it looks skewed? Because I don't,
Yes, so they were sending all of whenever there was a hold on a PG item, they would send it over to us and then customers could check it out at the library. Now they do that all the time anyway, but because their building was closed,
correct.
the only way to get a PG item was to come to the Monterey Public Library.
So I'd like to suggest that in these cases, the questions that I have, put a footnote there saying, this is why it looks skewed, or this is why it looks, so it doesn't raise the same question for everybody else who's looking at it. That's all I have. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Harish. Other trustee questions about this report or the attachments?
I had one other question, and that was at the top of page 36. Items withdrawn from the adult collection went way up, and I'm assuming that was because you culled it for the RFID project.
Right. So that's one of the things they recommend that you do when you're preparing for RFID is you catch up on your weeding. And if you haven't been able to do as much weeding as you usually like to do because of staffing shortages or whatever, you really need to buckle down and do the weeding, because you don't want to be putting tags on materials that really it's time for them to be withdrawn.
Right, but I see that the teen one went down and the children's one stayed the same. So most of the culling was in the adult section, I assume.
Right, because I would say that for teen, back when we had a teen librarian, she was very regular with doing her weeding, because that space is so small that you really have to stay on top of it in order to get the materials to fit in there. And similarly, there were youth librarians that had been weeding quite a bit before this time.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, if there are no other questions at this point, Bob, go ahead.
Just a quick question, Inga. If somebody purchased a weed at the outdoor book sale that was held recently and has finished reading the weed, how can one return it so that it can be resold? It's one of those that was withdrawn.
Yeah, sure. That's a great question. The Friends and Foundation accept donations of books, including books that used to belong to the library, on Wednesdays and Saturdays from 1 to 3 p.m.
Okay, just bring it there. Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Because I have a used up weed to return.
Okay, if there are no other questions at this point, Francesca, could you see if there's any public input on this item?
Yes, to make a comment, please raise your Zoom hand, or if you are connected by phone, dial *9. There are no public comments at this time, Chair Thompson.
Okay, thank you. I do have one, or actually two comments. Maybe I could just start on packet page 37, the one that shows the internal benchmarking. I think showing this 3 years worth of data is very helpful, but given the closure of the library and the sidewalk service, each of these years is so different that it's hard to know kind of what to make of it. But I think this next year, fiscal year 21, 22, and afterwards, it will be interesting to compare to 18, 19. So assuming we decide that we want to continue doing this annual report of this type, if it's not too much, and maybe it could be done by making the page horizontal instead of vertical or something like that. But I think it would be useful, since we already have the data from the old years, to continue to show, like, assuming we have it for 21, 22, and 22, 23, to still have the 18, 19, which in a sense is kind of a benchmark year, the last full year before the pandemic. To me, that would be very useful to be able to compare that, because right now the years are so different in terms of staffing and and hours that the library was open and so on, that it's very hard to make any meaningful. I mean, it's interesting to look at, but I think once we're a little bit back to normal, it'll be much more interesting to compare to 18, 19 on kind of an ongoing basis. So not forever, but maybe for the next couple of years, if we could keep 18, 19 on the columns, I think that would be useful. The other comment I'd like to make is that I, as one of the members of the committee that recommended this approach, I looked at this pretty carefully, and it all reflects what the committee had recommended, the committee of Marcia and I back in the summer, I believe it was. And I think Inga and David did an excellent job of putting this together, and it's very consistent with what we had recommended. And I still think what we're doing on the monthly report, which is later on our agenda under item number 10, the statistical report, I still think it makes sense to continue to have that monthly. But this one here that we're looking at right now, I think annually makes sense, especially since that's when we do the state survey. And it would take a lot more staff time, I fear, if we were to do it this one more frequently than annually. And some of the information, like the checkouts at the other cities, the residents of other cities, is very interesting, but I don't really think we need it more than once a year, in my opinion. So maybe I can start off the discussion a little bit of the frequency with my suggestion that we continue with the monthly for what we have as item number 10, the statistical report, and keep this one as annual, and see what perspectives other trustees may have on that, as well as the components of the reports. So other comments?
I agree with the idea of using the state report to populate this annually, so that when you do that report anyway, you excerpt these and do it. And I think it's really interesting to see the numbers change over the years, particularly the drop in your operating expenditures from 3 million to 2.8 to 1.5, even though it is anomalous. So I think that's a very good idea to just have it once a month, once a year.
Okay, other comments, Bob?
Yeah, I agree too. And I think using the data that we have to compile and send into the state to form this report is an excellent way to go about it. If it's easily available, I'm not suggesting or asking for something if it's going to take much extra staff time. In previous contexts, for different reasons, we have seen comparisons of Monterey Public Library with other similarly sized libraries. And if there's any way to pick out some, and I'd leave this for you to decide which ones, but if there are any pieces of information that you're compiling for the state, and then pulling out for us in this report that you could also easily pull out about other similarly sized libraries throughout the state for that kind of comparison, rather than comparing us with PG or something. I would find that very interesting, but I'm not asking you to spend a lot more extra time doing it. But if it's part of a state thing that you can pull out a little bit here and there, I would enjoy seeing that.
Yeah.
So,
Any comment, Inga?
well, my comment would be that there's a delay between when the individual libraries. So I think we established a great, we used really good criteria to establish a peer group. So we have that group that we could pull data from. But the thing is that it takes a while for the state to compile this data and then release it.
Oh, sure, it'd be a handful of months down the line, but I mean, at some point, I think that would be good. Maybe we should say 6 months later, if that gives the state enough time. Just to pull a few pieces of information to compare us to those other similar institutions that we already know about.
Yeah, I think that would be useful.
Okay, and not, just to clarify, that would not be doing a survey of the others that we would do ourselves, but rather just using data readily available from the state survey to reduce the amount of staff time required to do that, right? Yeah, good. Other comments? If not, I think maybe we should have a motion to clarify the frequency of the annual and monthly reports, maybe that they would be annual and monthly. Anyone care to make a motion? Because when we discussed this before, there were some alternate thoughts about maybe doing it at different frequencies. That's why I think it's worth providing clear direction to staff. So if no one else is, I'll offer a motion to direct staff to provide the types of information shown in this item 5 on an annual basis to the board, and the information included in item number 10, the statistical report, to provide that to the board monthly.
I'd be happy to second that.
Thompson made the motion and Felguth seconded. Is there any discussion of the motion? Francesca, could you call the roll? Do we have
Oh,
Francesca?
look at me, they got the right name this time.
Are you there, Francesca? Seeing not, Inga, would you call the roll?
Sure. Trustee Petty,
Yeah,
Trustee Joshi,
Yes,
Trustee Moreau,
Yes,
Vice Chair Felguth,
Yes.
and Chair Thompson.
Yes, thank you, Inga. Motion carries unanimously. So we'll move on to item number 6, which is to receive an update from the Ad Hoc Policy Review Committee. Would you like to provide a bit of an overview, Inga, and then Marcia or I can jump in?
Sure. Okay. So this committee was appointed at the last board meeting and consists of Chair Thompson and Trustee Moreau. And our first step was to look at the entire list of policies and to begin to say which policies look like they need updating. And I've asked staff to give feedback on which policies they know need some updating or revision. And then we wanted at this opportunity to invite the full board members to provide any comments about policies that they think need to be looked at for possible revision, updating, or I suppose it could even be a new policy needs to be created on something. And if you haven't brought those ideas to this meeting, to be sure to get them to me by December 23rd so I can compile them and provide them to the committee.
Very good. Marcia, anything you'd like to add?
I think so. I think you've got it.
Yeah, I would just add that so far we've, I think, identified approximately 10 policies that we're thinking probably need revision, but we're still in the very early stages of our own review and still waiting to see if staff have further suggestions. But we wanted to at least give the other trustees an opportunity to let us know early on if you happen to be aware of any policies that you think would merit consideration for revision. And if you don't have any right now, that's fine. But if you do have some, if you could please let Inga know by the end of the year, by December 23rd, say, so that we can wrap that up into the work that we're already doing. So do any of the Marcia?
Sorry, I forgot. I did want to mention to everybody else that a lot of the updating that we're doing has to do with outdated technology or outdated practices that the library is no longer doing because things have changed. So if you see any references to things like faxes and
Telnet.
yes, and Telnet, don't worry about that. We're taking care of those things.
Yeah, very
as
good.
you review.
There are also some references to positions on the staff that don't exist anymore, like assistant library director or program managers. And so we wanted an archivist. So we wanted to clean up that language too.
So we're talking about policies in the library board policy manual,
Correct.
of
Correct.
which this 603 is one.
Correct.
Board policy 603 is one of them.
Right.
Correct. And you can
Refresh my empty memory, what prompted this? Because it's not something that is done on a regular schedule. It says as necessary. I don't remember what prompted this effort at this time. I think it's useful to do, but it's not on a regular basis. So I'm wondering what, stimulated it this time.
Yeah, I'd have two comments, and then Inga, I think, could add to that. One is actually a couple of years ago, that policy that you're referencing, Bob, 603, is that it?
Yeah.
It used to say that the board would do this annually. And we decided that was a little too often and perhaps not realistic, and it hadn't been done annually for several years. So we actually changed that a couple of years ago to be periodically, kind of at the discretion of the chair. And so Inga had actually suggested that she was aware of some, and I was actually aware of one major one that I thought needed definite updating. And so I think we kind of jointly thought it made sense to do it at this point. But Inga, you may want to add to that.
Sure. Yeah, there's one major one that I've been trying to work with city staff on to get it updated now for a number of years, and that's the personnel policy. And when Jim joined the trustees, I mentioned it to him, and he'd actually worked on the last version of our personnel rules. So he seemed like
back when I was a staff member.
Yeah, so it seemed like perfect opportunity to get him to look at it with me again, and sort of by having the trustees supporting it, then it might get more traction with finding time for the city attorney and the HR director to work on it with us as well.
So is the plan that the ad hoc policy review committee is going to present something to the entire board at a future meeting to which everybody will respond?
Correct.
Right.
In fact, there's a good chance that we will do it in chunks, that there's some that we may be able to bring forward reasonably quickly, meaning within a couple of months. There are others that may take longer. So we may come back several times with different groups of policies, or even just one policy at a time. So I almost certainly will not be just coming back once with a whole slew with maybe 10 policies. It might be 2 or 3 here and there, or 1 here and there. But anyway, but our goal would be to be done by the end of June with this effort, because the ad hoc committees are supposed to be time limited, at least according to the advice we have from our city attorney.
Right, and a number of them are policy revisions that, like I said, updating language, which are really something that staff can do, and staff can do that throughout the year. Right. So there'll be a number of policies that we'll want to bring to you that just say, strike the reference to fax machine, strike the reference to Telnet, and but we'll use the same process, which is a first reading and a second reading.
And ultimately, it's the board that votes to approve any changes.
Correct.
Right.
And as Inga said, in both a first reading and a second reading. Yeah, so the committee will basically be coordinating with Inga and the staff on these to present recommendations to the board for changes. Any other comments or questions? If not, Francesca, would you see if there's any members of the public that would like to comment on item number 6? Inga, do you have any way of checking on that?
I can text Francesca and see if she is available. Kim, I don't know if you could walk over to chamber.
Okay, well, let's.
Recording stopped. Recording in progress.
We seem to be having some technical difficulties.
There's a text here from her that says, I'm here.
In the chat. So it looks like
It's like something is going funny.
I'm here. Okay. So
Okay, Francesca, can you speak to us?
I'm not sure. Says I'm not sure what happened.
The host has muted everyone. Oh, now we're unmuted.
I'm just
Oops.
checking, did that possibly do anything?
So now we can hear you, Francesca.
We can
I
hear.
don't see anything now.
We can see you.
You see?
No, but all I see is a big blank screen with the word Zoom on it. I don't see any pictures.
I'm back to normal.
Mm,
And
Where's
back to normal as well.
It says, you want me to join a new meeting, it's asking me.
No, you don't want to, because you're in the meeting.
Yeah, but it might appear like I'm in the meeting, but I don't see anything. I just have a blank screen with the word Zoom on it now.
It might be if you look down on your toolbar on your computer that you'll see the Zoom.
Let's hit that little Zoom.
There we go.
Yeah.
Oh,
Are you back?
We
yeah, I'm okay now.
You're back. Okay, good.
Okay, my apologies. For anyone who would like to make a comment, please raise your Zoom hand or dial *9. There are no public comments at this time, Chair Thompson.
Thank you, Francesca, and welcome back. So again, we'd request that if any trustees that are not on the ad hoc committee have any suggestions for policies that you think we should review, to please let Inga know by December 23rd. And with that, I think we're ready to move on to the informational reports and staff comments, starting with item number 7, which is to receive the quarterly museums and cultural arts activities report. Do you have any items you'd like to highlight, Inga?
I did want to mention, sorry, for our last item, I did want to mention that if, in case people didn't see it, that you can click on a link to the library policies that's on our website, and that was provided in your packet.
Good, thank you.
Sure. Then with regard to the museums, basically what I highlighted is that as of this report, all museums have resumed hours of operation at some level, significantly reduced, but at some level, except for PBL, which was only open once a month anyway. So now it's back to being open once a month. So that was a really great accomplishment, and it was done partly by having Hans suggest, and we implemented having a volunteer coordinate the volunteers that coordinate the PBL tours, and also a volunteer coordinate the volunteers that staff the Lower Presidio Museum. So speaking of use of volunteers, that worked out for us. And then the other thing that was a big accomplishment that took place during this quarter was to finally determine the disposition of and then remove the San Xavier Cannery warehouse objects that had been stored by the city of Monterey since 1997. So that had been a project that needed to be dealt with and then finally was dealt with. And then also, just speaking of the future, so this will appear in the next quarterly report that you read, but kudos to Francesca and Jordan Leninger, who have been working on Christmas in the Adobes. And Christmas in the Adobes, for us, that means that Colton Hall will be open on December 10th and December 11th from 5 to 9 p.m. And it's been a lot of work for the two of them to put that together. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Inga. Questions, Marcia?
Well, this is a comment. First of all, I heard yesterday that Christmas in the Adobes was sold out. Apparently they limited the tickets to 1,000 people a day, and I think that they're all gone. So I just wanted to mention that. And I had a question. What does the revenue from Christmas at the Adobes, does it go into the museums to fund them, or where does
It's a fundraiser for Mishpah, I believe. So state parks. And but the revenue that is they encourage all different historic buildings and adobes in the downtown area to participate, and that's how Colton Hall has been participating all these years. But also there is a little bit of revenue generated those 2 evenings because Colton Hall is selling their merchandise. So if people decide they want to purchase any of the books or cards that Colton Hall sells, then of course all of those proceeds go to the trust funds for the museum.
Thank you.
Any other questions? If not, Frangelica, could you see if there's any public input on item number 7?
Yes, and Inga, I hope you don't mind my sharing that in the case any of the trustees do hear of somebody who might be interested in volunteering, we do still have some slots available at Colton Hall. So for anyone though who would like to make a public comment, please raise your Zoom hand or dial *9. There are no public comments at this time.
Okay, thank you, Francesca. This is no action required on this item. So if there's no other trustee comments, I think we can move on to the next item. Any other discussion? Seeing none, we'll move on to item number 8, which is to receive a quarterly library activity report. Would you like to highlight anything, Inga, on item number 8?
Kim wrote item number 8, and I don't know if she has anything that she particularly wanted to point out. This is for October, and we had, do you want to say anything, Kim?
No, I wrote it like 2 weeks ago. It's all a blur.
Okay, so I think the staff have done a great job with programming. The children's program, the story time has been really popular. We had a big group of people attend an outdoor October 28th, maybe it was, story time where people dressed up in costumes, and that was very well attended. And then so we had to bring those story times indoors, but in the open indoors because of the weather. But then I wanted to point out that Sean Briscoe has continued to do a really great job with virtual programming, and we did this big push again this year, Cannery Row Days, from September through the end of November. Had really good attendance, focused on the novel Sweet Thursday by John Steinbeck, but then had different lectures each week that looked at an aspect of that novel and then took it in a different direction. So we had somebody who just spoke about the dunes and the ecology of sand dunes, because sand dunes are featured in the novel. Or one of the things that happens in the novel is the character Doc is studying octopus, and so we had somebody who talked about cephalopods, and I think there were over 100 people who participated in that particular lecture. That was a speaker who had retired from the aquarium. So anyway, it was a fun partnership with some other organizations. And then Sarah Nolan has been super creative in having programs for adults. And one that was really successful was this Chopped program where adults took bags of mystery ingredients home and then showed us what they cooked with them. So really great out of the box kind of programming from Sarah. So that's about it.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Any trustee comments or questions about this item?
Just want to say bravo, bravo to those innovative programs that we're seeing creating what I guess would be our new normal. I'm just really, really pleased with all that.
Yeah, I would certainly echo that, especially with the limited staff that we continue to have. It's remarkable, all the things that are going on, I think. Other comments or questions? If not, Francesca, could you see if there's any public comment on item number 8?
Yes, to make a public comment, please raise your Zoom hand or dial *9 if connected by phone. There are no public comments at this time, Chair Thompson.
Thank you, Francesca. If there's no other comments on this, I think we're ready to move on to item number 9. Any other comments on this before we leave it?
So when's my opportunity to make a few informational comments? Would it be appropriate to do that in connection with this activity report or after the next 2 reports?
I was thinking of at the end of this section,
Okay.
after number 10, if that's okay.
That's fine. Yes.
Very good. So item number 9 is the financial report. Any particular things you'd like to highlight on that, Inga?
Well, I received the good news that Finance Director has asked everyone for their corrections for the mid-year budget review. She asked this week for us to submit them to her by the 22nd of December. So hopefully, once that goes and is approved by council, you'll see a little bit more accuracy for some of these budget lines.
Good, good. I appreciate that. Any other comments or questions?
Just a quick question on packet page 59, the library trust fund, 1,184.5% over there. If you want to say something about that, about the.
Yeah, so that was where they didn't use the number that we had agreed on for what our fundraising revenue would look like. And instead they used the number of $5,400. And we all know that we were going to raise more than that this year. And so that's why it looks so outstanding.
It is outstanding, but perhaps not quite that outstanding. Bob.
Quickly, on page 58 in the general fund section, in the far lower right corner, have we grossly underspent what we should have after almost half a year of the general fund? It says we've only spent 27.9%, unless I'm just glossing over something here. I mean, shouldn't it be closer to we've almost spent 50%?
Well, no, it's actually for 4 months through October. So just proportionally, that would be 33%, not 50%. 4 months out of 12.
Oh, okay. I guess I didn't see the time frame. Oh, there he is. Tiny print. I missed it. Yeah. So 4 months. You're right. So it would have been a third.
Yeah. So we're just a little under.
And since it's the same fiscal year, that continues to roll over. So in effect, we could spend a little bit more the next group of months.
Yes. And it's actually timed that way because we have more full-time positions beginning, which I'll talk about in a few minutes. And the salary monies will get spent more quickly because we're spending more on full-time people.
Good, good. Thank you.
Mhm.
If no other questions on that, Francesca, could you see if there's any public comment on item number 9?
Yes, to make a public comment, please click raise hand. And if you are connected by phone, dial *9. There are no public comments at this time, Chair Thompson.
Thank you, Francesca. Any other comments on this item before we move on to the next item? Seeing none, I'm sorry, did someone have something? Thought I heard somebody say something. I'm sorry. Moving on then to item number 10, receive a statistical report. Anything you'd like to highlight there, Inga?
One thing that I thought was, I'm sure there are many things that are significant, but one of the things that I thought was significant is if we look at the bottom of packet page 63, you see, but it's obscured, of course, by the footer, but our number of hours from volunteers has increased significantly over comparison to last year, but the number of volunteers that we use has decreased. And basically what that means is we have a smaller group, but of core volunteers who've been putting in a lot of work, and we really appreciate them.
Yeah, good point. Good point. Other comments or questions about the statistical report? I'd just like to offer an observation. It's not really a question, but I thought it was very interesting in comparing October 21 to October 19, looking just at the number of visits and the circulation, that the October 21 circulation is 72% of the October 19 circulation, but the number of visits was only 43%. And so another way of looking at that is that the number of circulations per visit went from 0.97, in other words, less than one item circulated per visit in October 19, to 1.6 items circulated per visit in October 21. So the people that are visiting are much more likely to be checking out material now than they were before, which is kind of interesting. Maybe that means less casual users coming in to read the newspaper. I don't know what it means, but I thought it was interesting. Do you have any observation about that, Inga?
I think you're right. We see less people just who are coming in and lingering for long periods of time in the library. And I'm not sure how our reduction in hours has influenced things. If, because people know we're open fewer hours, they might check out more things in one visit because they know they have fewer opportunities to come back.
Yeah, interesting, interesting. Okay, any other comments or questions? If not, then Francesca, could you see if there's any public comment on item number 10?
Yes, to make a public comment, please raise your Zoom hand or dial *9. There are no public comments at this time, Chair Thompson.
Thank you, Francesca. Then the next item under this category of informational and staff reports is any verbal reports that the director or other staff may have. Inga, did you have any verbal reports you'd like to make?
Sure, I did copy you all on an email, but I wanted to comment about our staffing changes. So as you know, we're doing a phased-in staffing model this year because of the dire economic situation that the city was in when we were planning our budget for this year. And phased in this case, meant that we were going to introduce a full-time librarian, a full-time reference and local history librarian in January. And we're going to introduce a regular part-time circulation assistant, and actually 2 circulation assistants, and then a full-time acquisitions position. And yeah, I think that was it. Anyway, prior to us, and the way that works is you offer those positions to the folks who've been laid off in order of seniority. And hope that they take position, and if they don't, then you wind up with a vacancy that you then decide how you're going to recruit for. So in this case, as we were getting closer to when we could offer these positions, I looked at the list and I realized that it would be a higher priority for us to have a full-time circulation position rather than an acquisitions position. So they were at the same classification level, so I switched those. And as a result, what we do have is we were going to have starting in January, but then Hans said, hey, let's start these in December as sort of a gift, a thank you to these folks who had been laid off. And so starting next week, December 16th, we are going to have a full-time circulation position, and that's Jocelyn Baca, that was the position she'd been laid off from. We're gonna have a full-time reference and local history librarian, that's Sean Baca, and Sean Prisco, and that was the position that he'd held before. Carl Salvaca is going to be a regular part-time circulation assistant, assistant 2, which is what position he held before. And then Christy Balistreri is going to be regular part-time in acquisitions. She was formerly full-time in acquisitions, but that's something that we can look at when we create the budget for next year. So this time she's going to be part-time in acquisitions. The other recruitment issue we have is the bookmobile. And in our activity report, we announced that our wonderful bookmobile driver had resigned in November. And so we're going to do an internal recruitment for that position and hope that one of the city employees who's currently with us, either in the library or elsewhere in the city, will apply so that we can fill that position quickly. And if not, we're going to have to use part-time staff until we get that position filled.
Yeah, and that's an important position, no question. Thank you for that update. That's very good news about being able to bring back a number of staff that have been laid off or working only part-time. Anybody have questions on Inga's report on the staffing issues? If not, I think any other verbal reports you wanted to make, Inga?
And that's it at this time.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Then let's move on to trustee comments. Any comments, starting with Trustee Joshi?
I've been to the library a few times and I was pleased to see how well it's running. So I'm glad to be there, and please keep up the good work.
Thank you.
Very good. Trustee Mora?
I noticed that the display of the health benefits of practicing gratitude that Francesca put in the library, and I wanted to call that one out and to say, in terms of gratitude, I'm very grateful for all the things that the library has done for all of us in the community.
Well said. Trustee Petty?
Let's see. I have a question of anybody here who was more on top of things day before yesterday than I was. By the time I logged on to the city council meeting, they'd already passed the item where they have to approve continuing meetings by remote. Did that pass? Does anybody know?
Yes, I actually observed that council meeting, and it was on the consent calendar and it passed with no discussion.
Okay, I joined the council meeting too late. It had already gone past it. And yes, I'll concur with Yoshi about how well everything seems to be running. And earlier, I was something Inga was saying about how talented David is came to mind. I was there one day checking out a book, not using my cell phone, but I was at one of the self-checks, and I slid my card in every which way to Sunday, and it wouldn't read it. And I thought, well, gee, and I tried to type it in, and it would type it in, but then when I slid the book in, it wouldn't read it. And I'm going, oh my gosh, I'd say I was pulling my hair out, but that happened a long time ago. So anyhow, Jocelyn, I think, came over, said, geez, I don't know, I guess the equipment is broken down again, glitches or something. And David happened to be walking by. And so she brought him over, or no, it was Katie who did. And I told him what was happening. And all I did was take his finger, and the little box that aims down into that V-shaped crevice where you slide the card and then you slide your book. That box that hangs down and flashes the like green stripe of light, you know, was out. It wasn't aiming correctly. So he just took his finger and went and pushed the box so it's aiming straight down and fixed it in like 5 seconds. So interesting little anecdote, but I think we're doing very, very well, and I'm looking forward to even more outstanding things next year, which I guess is the next time we're going to be meeting, and it'll be in the same format as today.
Very good. Thank you, Bob. Vice Chair Philbin.
Yeah, I just wanted to commend library staff. I popped by quickly the other day and I was really impressed at the reconfiguration of the downstairs in the library. Everything looked clean. There were folks in there. Everything seemed to be ticking along beautifully. So congratulations on that, and congratulations for getting us through a tough year. I want to wish all of the library staff and my fellow board members and trustees happy holidays, and I'll see you all next year.
Very good. Thank you, Jennifer. And I'll end with two comments. One, at the city council meeting on Tuesday that Bob referenced, part of the reason that I watched it to the end was they had a significant discussion about moving the city council seats from at-large to district elections. And that's quite a process on a fast track because of some pending litigation that requires it to be done within a certain time frame. And one of the reasons I mentioned that is that there's going to be a lot of public outreach in terms of trying to get input on maps and communities of interest. And I think it was Nat that mentioned that, or someone mentioned that there's going to be a station at the library where people can come in and I guess get maps to fill out and draw proposals for how the council seat districts should be drawn. And that's actually a very important issue for the city, I think. So I just wanted to see if Inga, if you could add anything more to what activities the library will have related to this whole redistricting, or not redistricting, but districting issue that the city is engaged in.
Sure. So we are going to have a mapping station, and the way the districts are mapped out, need to be mapped out, they need to have close to equal populations. And so the maps that the library will have show the census tracts and the population in those tracts. So basically, if you think there should be 4 districts, you would figure out how to draw these districts so that they have 4 relatively equal populations, and it's a number of people, which is shown on the census tract, as opposed to number of voters. So that obviously raises some concerns for some folks. But anyway, so once people draw on those maps and get something that they would recommend, they turn it in at the library help desk, and we'll be collecting those and turning them over to the city clerk's office. And then maybe Kim could say something about what we're going to have in the window. Do you know more about that, the maps that we're going to have in the window?
Oh, just that before the public meetings, or that they have to post the maps in a number of locations for access, and so we will have the information and the maps up at the end of this month going into early January. Those will be in the front lobby window.
Right, so that people can, even if the library is closed, they can walk by and look at what is the tentative districting so far.
Mm-hmm.
And just to add one point that I think has been mentioned at a previous library board meeting is, while the city council will be moving towards basically 4 council members elected by district with 1 at-large mayor, that none of that will apply to the boards and commissions. So it's not that the library board will be moving to different districts of the city for the library board members. That's not been raised as an issue at all. And the second issue I wanted to mention was just to echo all the wonderful comments all my fellow trustees have made about all the progress that the library staff have made this year. Does anybody know where the feedback is coming from? Thank you. Anyway, I just wanted to comment that it seems to me, compared to where we were at the beginning of this year and where we are now, the library has made major progress. And thank you to the trustees for working through a lot of issues in that regard. Thank you to the staff that have done just a tremendous job of bringing things back, in a rational, straightforward way, I think. And also, we need to remember to thank the volunteers, without whom we couldn't have done many of the things that we've been able to accomplish this year. And it sounds like, from what Inga said before, it's a relatively small group of people that are putting in a lot of hours. So if we can think of ways to more fully thank them, I would certainly be all on board with that. So anyway, with that, I want to thank you all and everyone that's involved with the library, and wish you all happy holidays, and adjourn the meeting to the January 27, 2022 meeting. Thank you. We are adjourned.
Thank you.